And joining us now to assess the developments, we have John Paluska, former Green Beret captain, Rick de la Torre, retired CIA operations officer and senior vice president at Continental Strategy, as well as Jonathan Gilliam, former Navy SEAL and former FBI special agent. Great to have such a panel here with us tonight. So President Trump in a Truth Social post today saying he wants unconditional surrender from the Iranian regime. Here's White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt speaking about it earlier.
The president means is that when he, as commander-in-chief of the U.S. Armed Forces, determines that Iran no longer poses a threat to the United States of America and the goals of Operation Epic Fury has been fully realized, then Iran will essentially be in a place of unconditional surrender.
John Paluska, we'll start with you. What would it take militarily, politically, and diplomatically to ultimately bring Iran to the point that the president is demanding?
Yeah, so look, I've got Iranian shrapnel in my body from when I deployed to Iraq. So this is a very personal space to me, and thanks for having me. I also want to preface, and I imagine the others on the panel here, those who have lost their lives and been wounded, they are not fighting a war for no reason at all. I mean, this had to happen. Iran has done this for many years, and we needed a policy that actually worked, and we just kicked it off. I think, if you think about what, we're looking at from a timeline, I believe the White House has put out, 4 to 6 weeks. And if that's what, to hit these 3 objectives, what we probably need, we need some, defragmentation. We need some, internal strength from the people of Iran. We need to identify, the successors. And, as a Green Beret and unconventional warfare plan, and you're doing secondary and tertiary plans. I mean, we've now killed the first leader, the second leader. I think the third leader is a little bit worried here. So to your questions there, I kind of bundle them a little bit together. And this war is becoming a little bit like Russia and Ukraine. And I think what Iran has gathered on is that they did not have the technology, and they don't need the technology for it to be a long-term strategy, but a short-term victory. And right now, that's kind of playing out for them.
John, we greatly appreciate your service, and we can totally understand how this would be personal to you. Rick, this wasn't intended to be my question for you, but John brings up an interesting point. We're seeing narratives in the information war sort of settling in. Talk to us about what role information plays in this type of conflict, and how one might need to be cautious in where they're consuming information, especially when it comes to trusted information sources, or what we would call mainstream media outlets in the United States, as a former CIA officer who might understand this better than most.
Right. So absolutely. I think if you look at what's happening right now, you've got 2 types of messaging campaigns coming out of the regime and the regime supporters, our adversaries like Russia and China. Those messages are targeted at 2 different camps, and that is either internally within Iran and then externally. So externally, they certainly want to put on a very brave face and say that they'll never be defeated, that in some claims that they're actually winning the war, or that that they've got everything that they need and that we'll pay. That's that part of that external messaging. Internally, of course, it's much more repressive. It's telling folks that don't even dare step outside and chant or show any kind of joy for the death of Khamenei or anything against the regime, because it'll be just executed right on the spot. I mean, we're talking about a regime that just a couple months ago executed, by some accounts, up to 30,000 protesters. So that messaging plays a very key part of this. We've all seen the streams on social media. A lot of it is AI enhanced. I think I saw one coming out of China that showed that the U.S.S. Abraham Lincoln had been destroyed by Iranian missiles and caused the death of over 5,000 sailors, which is obviously completely false and extremely easily verifiable. But when it goes into the internal machine within Iran, where they don't have access, well, most folks don't have access to external messages, they'll believe that kind of news outlet, especially if it's coming from another power like China, and shows something that may be believable. So I think those of us in the West, we're very skeptical about news coming out of Iran, obviously so, but that might not be the case in other parts of the world.
Jonathan, former Navy SEAL, thank you for your service as well, and former FBI special agent. I'd like you to weigh in on this too, following up on Rick's comments.
We know it's interesting because Rick, knows all about intelligence, and he could probably tell you more about Iran's intelligence capabilities than I even could. I know that they are. It's one of the things that they're really good at. They're good at proxy wars. They're good at terrorist attacks, and they have pretty robust intelligence agencies. And that is something that I think is, I'm not saying it's overlooked by this president, but it's something they should take very seriously. And just as important as the bombs and the missile programs and the nuclear program is Iran's intelligence program, because they're able to link all their propaganda and inside this United States using leftists and I would say Democrats, but it goes far beyond Democrats, the radicals that are here. And the Red-Green Alliance, which is Islam and communism, and how they work together. And we see that in cases like Minneapolis. We see it with all the different riots and protests where it's the same groups of people. They have similar tactics, such as the first and second intifada, where it started out as verbiage and then kind of moved quickly into pseudo-terrorism into the point where they're just killing. And they follow these tactics. They follow the verbiage. They support Hamas and now Iran all of a sudden. So that's a concern for me, is that not only do we need to worry about hitting them from the air and convincing their people to move forward inside Iran and take over that nation, but also how the intelligence groups are working out. Because I don't know who the president actually, who he's talking to, because everybody's dead that's in the leadership position in Iran. So I don't know who they're debating with or who they're trying to strike a deal with, because it's they must be way down the food chain, because the upper echelon is gone.
Indeed, it's a very complex situation. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt reiterating the president's timeline for the war. Here's what she said.
The achievable objectives of Operation Epic Fury we expect to last about 4 to 6 weeks, and we are well on our way to achieving those objectives.
John, Paluska, how are you assessing the progress we've made thus far in degrading Iran's military capabilities?
Yeah, undoubtedly, the Department of War and all of the sailors, airmen, that are out there have done a phenomenal job. We have degraded some of the most critical capabilities that Iran has basically had. 4 to 6 weeks. I think if we went back to the first 72 hours of this war, it probably made sense 4 to 6 weeks back then. I would say looking historically across, just because if you win the war, it doesn't necessarily mean that you win the peace. And I don't think this will be resolved in an entire 4 to 6 weeks. Those are different things. That we can win a kinetic fight in 6 weeks and own the stabilization for maybe 6 years, but we've earned it in blood. We've taken out a lot of their leadership. The clerics are scrambling. The leadership doesn't know really who to vote to put in place. The communications are fractured, and we now have to think, who do we want to win? Ideally, we want the people to rise up. We can't choose that. This is not necessarily a Venezuela. This isn't some of the other wars that you've seen. It's nothing similar to what we've had success with in the Middle East. It's been very challenging. I could see with the way that they have taken this lack of technology against us, we're launching, I don't know, close to $100 million, a day, defending some of these $30,000 drones. It could last a long time, and I imagine they have stockpiles of them still in existence. And our intelligence sources believe that it's whether they maintain the power over the people, and the people are going to subject to what was the former regime, and they'll allow it to be. And so Trump's going to have to make a decision. Is he going to have a halfway solution of someone that's left in the regime? I think that's probably the likely scenario where we are today. I'm not seeing the people having the freedom of mobility, during war operations. The kinetic, stuff, like that we're watching on the news, 24/7. Sure, that might end in six weeks. But the drone warfare, the whole AI, the info game, it's going to continue for well beyond that.
Rick, if you could weigh in on sort of the complex nature of Iran. You have Persians, you have Kurds, you have all these different ethnic groups, and how they all sort of factor into the equation. And where is the military? There's a narrative out there saying, nobody knows what the objective is, but I think the president was clear in saying he wants to degrade the Iranian military so that they don't pose a threat to the United States. Where are we in terms of achieving that objective?
Well, it'll be hard for me to condense over 5,000 years of Persian history into a 30, 40-second soundbite. Needless to say, you are right. There are a number of different cultures, languages, and religions within Iran. Sadly, since the fall of the Shah and the rise of the mullahs and clerics within Iran, what you did see was them driving out Jews and Christians and other Islamic faiths out of Iran. The Kurds just east of Afghanistan, just east of Iraq and in that northern part of Iraq, just south of the Iranian border. Those are the folks that now are on the march into Iran to try to take some of their ancestral homes back and maybe establish some sort of front there for themselves. In regards to how we're doing in eliminating the actual military threat from Iran, I think we're much better off this week than we were last week when we kicked off this campaign. The immediate objective, obviously, is to go after medium-range and small-range missile systems, and then their mobile rocket systems. It's fair to say that any of their longer-range missile programs have just been utterly destroyed. The mobile rocket systems, as soon as they launch, they light up, and then Allied forces are able to destroy those within minutes before they could actually get back on the road and move into a different position. There are a large number of these very cheap and inexpensive but extremely deadly drones that they keep launching and rather successfully in some cases. But it's because of the swarm effect. They overwhelm the Iron Dome. They overwhelm other passive radar systems that are able to detect them and take them out because there's just so many of them. And all they have to do is just get one through, and if one gets through, well, it becomes something deadly. So those are now where we're at. I think, as was stated earlier, we do have air superiority. I think we'll have total air superiority probably within the next week or so. And once that occurs, then we'll be in a much better position to use more of our generic munition systems that aren't as expensive or aren't as scarce to go after much more hardened or isolated target sets. So we're in good footing. I think we're still in the process, as Secretary of War Hegseth said. We need to defang the Iranian regime. I'd say we probably have one fang out, and we're pulling on the second fang, and we should have them completely defanged hopefully very soon.
To your point, Rick, I believe it was some of those unmanned drones that Iran has been sending out that killed the 6 service members at the military base in Kuwait, along with hitting some of our embassies in other Gulf states. Those unmanned drones Jonathan Gilliam, yesterday the U.S. Central Command saying Iranian missile attacks have now decreased, however, 90% since the first day of war. More than 30 Iranian ships now destroyed. In your opinion, what is still left to be done?
Well, there's a tremendous amount left to be done as long as there's fighting forces that don't want to surrender. And if they have the ability to launch any missiles or make any type of covert strikes or send out propaganda, as we were talking about before, there's still a lot to be done. But a lot of that has to be done on the ground. And that's where, in convincing the citizens that they have to act on this, that this is the time to act, and they have to come together and push forward. I mean, we know that they're capable of coming together and with the same motivation. So this is a huge part of this, and using whatever forces that we can muster up, that we can associate with these people to get them to actually do the fight. To actually, this is what separates this. I know we were talking earlier about this isn't Venezuela. It's certainly not Iraq and Afghanistan. I would say it's closer to Venezuela in the fact that the people of Iran are similar to the people of Venezuela, where they were sick and tired of how their nation had been completely destroyed by the leadership there. And so I think there is a lot of people that are behind this. I think the Kurds are very important in this aspect. But there's only one thing that I would like to see the president do different. And he knows more than we do, and he's a master at this game. So he could listen to my advice if he wants to, but he does a great job anyway. But I would refrain from giving deadlines, because deadlines are what you're literally handing a soundbite to the opposition and to this leftover Iranian propaganda machine, where they can use that and try to push the pressure upon President Trump, which could cloud his decision making. But by no means am I saying that he is going down a road that he's made any mistakes. I've never seen a leader in the free world since World War II that had such command and control over the military and precise understanding of where it could be used, when it should be used, and how to negotiate up to a point and then cut that off and use overwhelming force. I mean, it's remarkable. And I know the other guest, John and Rick, I mean, I wish I was still young enough to be back in, because this is unbelievable what's going on. I would love to be a part of this. It kills me every day, when I wake up and I have to limp to the bathroom in the mornings because I'm so sore. It kills me, because I'd love to be back in there in this fight.
Well, I'm sure the audience is really enjoying this. Yeah. I'm sure the audience and viewers are greatly appreciating this conversation with all the experience that we have here. So we will ask you guys to stick with us as we take a quick break. John Paluska, Rick De La Torre, Jonathan Gilliam on the other side. Meantime, we're looking right now at a live shot of Beirut, Lebanon. The IDF saying it has destroyed an underground bunker located under Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's compound in Tehran. This as the Chinese Communist Party holding its annual policy meeting. So how is Operation Epic Fury affecting the CCP? We'll be back with our panel, John Paluska, Rick De La Torre, and Jonathan Gilliam, just after the break. And today the IDF saying it destroyed a major underground bunker that Iranian leaders had planned to use in an emergency, and the Chinese Communist Party holding its annual policy meeting. So how might Operation Epic Fury be affecting the communist regime in China? To discuss, we're back with our panel, John Paluska, former Green Beret, Green Beret Captain, Rick De La Torre, retired CIA operations officer, and Jonathan Gilliam, former Navy SEAL and former FBI special agent. Gentlemen, great to have you back with us. Thanks for sticking around. So the U.S. military debuting a low-cost unmanned combat attack system, or what's being called a Lucas drone, during Operation Epic Fury. Here's CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper talking about this at a presser earlier today.
Lucas, indispensable. As many of you know, and if you don't know, this was an original Iranian drone design. We captured it, pulled the guts out, sent it back to America, put a little Made America on it, brought it back here, and we're shooting them at the Iranians.
That was CENTCOM commander there speaking about that yesterday. Jonathan, talk to us about the efficiency of this reverse engineering strategy and how the U.S. military is using it to its advantage.
I think the taxpayers love it. I don't know if the military contracting agents or companies like it that much, but this is I think it's a very efficient way. You know, they have used these drones, and these are battle-tested drones. The same thing over in the Ukraine, the way they've used those against Russia and back and forth. I mean, this type of technology is very, very important for the United States because we've overthought a lot of stuff, and we make great technology. But in this case, this is the changing battlefield, and it is the sound of these drones is terrifying alone. Just the sound of them alone is terrifying. So the fact that we got this and reverse engineered it that quick is not only effective, but it's also a complete insult to Iran. But it also shows the rest of the world how quick we are to learn and progress, which again is a defining moment in military's evolution, in our military's evolution, because one of the stumbling blocks we've had for in certain aspects is that when we get entrenched in this, that's not the way we do it type of mentality, things won't ever change. And so this new mentality of cheaper technology, faster technology, easier to use, and in this case, grabbing something that works, reverse engineering, and putting it back out there. This is an out-of-the-box way of thinking for the military, more attuned to unconventional warfare, and it is, I think it's amazing, and I think we'll see what's effective progress dramatically as this continues.
And arguably, Iran is just a proxy for China. Chances are China had some hand in that technology, so it might be bittersweet that we're reverse engineering some of China's technology to use it against them, whether it be in a proxy way or not. But I digress. I do want to pivot to China, Rick. Right now, as we speak, delegates of the CCP holding their annual policy meeting in Beijing. This under very tense circumstances. We've seen a lot of upheaval there amidst their generals. The CIA releasing a video about a week or two ago calling on any generals who are discouraged by the current situation to report back to the United States. Given the regime's ties to Iran, how is China currently viewing these developments in the Middle East?
Well, I think it predates Iran. If you look at what we did with the arrest of Nicolas Maduro and moving those oil resources to the United States, and then now with Iran, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, and those oil resources not flowing to China, in just the last 60 or so days, what we've done is we have taken about 25% of crude oil that China would be importing. And now they don't have that. So we've taken 20% of crude oil off the table for China, and that's got to hurt. Most recent economic reporting is showing that the Chinese economy is contracting or not growing at the pace they need it to grow at. So there's a huge amount of economic pressure also on the Chinese regime. And as you mentioned correctly, a large number of its military leadership has been either arrested or just kind of disappeared in the middle of the night to only show up weeks later or charged with crimes. That has to have some significant it has to be a significant stressor on those within the military, within the PLA, and within the Chinese regime. So as this leadership summit plays out, it'll be interesting to see what is China's response. How are they going to pivot? Further news also this morning, we learned that the Chinese government stopped its aerial flight over Taiwan, something that they had been doing consistently for a number of weeks. And for some reason, they decided not to do that today. That's not by accident, I tell you. Those are well planned out, very well orchestrated and controlled decisions coming from Beijing. So I think Beijing is recognizing that their reach into Latin America, their reach into the Middle East is not as strong as it used to be, and they're going to have to recalculate what that means for them and where they're going to have to focus the limited resources that they do have.
That point you just raised, Rick, with the CCP's air incursions into Taiwan airspace seemingly dropping off. When you look at the ratio and the number of incursions, it's been incredible over the past few years, and now none. It certainly speaks to something. John Paluska, how is Operation Epic Fury affecting the CCP's regional ambition, at least in the Middle East?
Yeah, I think Rick had a number of great points there. China, they're lose all week. I mean, they lose an energy partner, they lose their ability to export their arms, their credibility there, and they lose because they're distracted by America that is having all of these successes right now, which they've depended on for us for two plus decades. If you think about from a GDP perspective, one card that they are holding in a way with Iran and in more the kinetic and tactical way for Iran, but they're holding patience and they're really waiting to see one thing. Are we going to deplete all of our missions inventory? And they also see another opportunity through that with Taiwan. That's this potential Taiwan window, and this is the questions that I think Jonathan, Rick, when we go back, we're like, is this the time? Is this Iran threat? Is it systematically moving to a place where it's dismantling parts of us to be able to pivot and be there for Taiwan? I think what we have to our advantage is the geography. You think about where all of our fleets are, where all of our strike groups are. We're over there right now in the Persian Gulf, and to move slightly over to the Indo-Pacific is not too far away. And so I think China is also aware of that.
And the president's scheduled to make a trip to Beijing at the end of the month. This after I heard some China analysts saying that the president of the United States has just completely reshuffled the deck, and now China has a pretty awful hand. It'll be fascinating to see the president of the United States making his way to Beijing in the backdrop of all that's happened between Venezuela and now Iran. Unfortunately, we do have to leave it there. John Paluska, Rick de la Torre, Jonathan Gilliam, greatly appreciate you all